Scott DeFilippis, Lionel Sanders, Sarah Piampiano. All of these phenomenal pro triathletes still go through the same program because they don't need to become Olympians, and we all benefit from doing these simple things right over and over and over. Okay, so how do you actually move forward with this? Few things. If you're still at the point of not feeling comfortable in the water, that means you can't yet swim a 400 meter or yard continuous, without stops, effort, and without feeling out of breath at the end of it, you need to develop comfort in the water, and for that, go to triathlonterran.com/swim drill program. If you are already able to do that 400 meter or yard test and you want to improve your swimming, Tower 26 is great. Our Team Trainiac platform, which is going to be live, if not when you watch this, but very shortly after, you can go to triathlonterran.com/team waitlist and just be emailed when it is live, because all of our stuff is largely based off of that Tower 26 stuff. So there we go, Trainiacs. If you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button below. If you are subscribed, it's going to be a new 2019, lots of big things, lots of awesome things with Team Trainiac. Stay tuned for it all. And I gotta start getting this place ready to head out to Lanzarote. Later. Morning, Trainiacs. So, over the end of December, a whole lot of packages arrived. Things that I bought, things that were sent to me, gifts, because we are Christmas people, and they've really built up. So let me show you my Christmas haul right after this brutal bike workout. Ooh. Hot damn, that was tough. Just a 36-minute ride. But these midday rides on Team Trainiac are like, woo, intense. I almost lost my cookies there. I almost lost a wife. You see that? She almost fell off the back of the treadmill shooting me. Crazy. Okay, let me wrap this up and get into that pile of cardboard. So, all right, Trainiacs, come over here, over here. Everything that you see here is what I have purchased or acquired over the course of Christmas 2018. Actually, most of it is stuff that I have purchased. Not a whole lot of freebies in here, and we're not big on gifts, but there's a lot of fun triathlon stuff in here. Here, let's get into it, shall we? I could bring these all over one at a time, but let's speed this up through the magic of television. Whew. There's a lot of stuff. All right, let's show you some of the fun things. Let's go here. Less fun. A hacksaw with some blades because I know that I'm gonna have to get rid of that bike over there when the new Ventum comes in. I wanna cut the top tube. So I'm going to start doing more triathlon repair and maintenance content here on the channel instead of just taking it to Alter Ego at like every time I need to lube the chain. So I need some of the tools for it, hence hacksaw. Hand and toe warmers for when I'm on the fat bike, cold in Winnipeg. And here, I hope you like disgusting Speedos because who's this guy? Or these guys? Oh man. If there ever was a good looking Speedo in this world, this is it. Tell me about it, hey? Thank you to my dad and brother. His name's Jesse. He looks like me, not as good looking. And then in here, this isn't a present, but I was running low on all the 4 Sigmatic mushroom coffees that I love, all the elixirs and everything. I have this stuff every single day, a little bit of the matcha in my morning bulletproof shake. And I was running low, so I hit them up. They are another sponsor of the Triathlon Terran podcast for 2019, so you can still get 15% off by going to foursigmatic.com/triathlon Terran and using the coupon code Triathlon Terran at checkout. Get yourself 15% off any Four Sigmatic products. Oh, I'm on shrooms. What else is less fun? Right here, this is an external hard drive. What we are going to start doing is, while I am talking about training this, training that, triathlon this, triathlon that, we are going to store all of our favorite footage on here and make these videos even crispier by taking some of that old footage that we've gotten. We can now easily access it because we'll always have this external hard drive handy. This thing that fell, this is a chain keeper. Before you start thinking, hey, not the coolest, let me show you what we're gonna do. So you see how when you take off the back wheel and you travel that back wheel off, the chain just dangles away, rubbing against the frame potentially? Throw on the Feedback Sports chain keeper and all of a sudden, you've got this little groove that you can end up putting the chain in. And look at this. It's just kept nice and tight. Safety first with your bikes. All that's left, fun stuff. Here, Vibram 5-finger toe shoes that put on my feet. And what I've been finding is that even though I love me my Ufos sandals, walking around in these, because it's so cushy, it's developed a bit of it's like a crutch for my feet. But if I spend maybe an hour to 3 hours and then some of my more controlled workouts around here, not running anyone, but weightlifting workouts in these toe shoes, develop a little bit more mobility in my feet. Less susceptible to injury, healthy feet are always good. So 5 fingers. Let's wait till we get into the big ones. Right here, this is a swim bubble for the GoPro. Let's get, ooh, so shrink wrappy. So you put the GoPro in back there, and then here you can get these crispy, you know those shots of the water? You know what, Mel? Here, cut in like boom, 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 boom. I'm gonna force you to end up doing that. Crap, finding those pictures. But you get that nice water line, and this ends up apparently making your footage underwater a lot crispier. And with us going to end up producing the How to Swim with Lucy Charles and Reese Barkley online course, I gotta make sure that all of the footage that we take from them is nice and crispy. So we got that for that. I bought that. Next, big things. Fun things. Let's go here first because I like symmetry. This here is a... I need some room for this. then now, just like that, I've got an easy way, safe way to work on all the bikes. Next. Ooh, while we're talking about master classes, we have got to have really nice smooth video for the how to bike and the how to run. And the gimbal that we've got to make things really smooth, not great. So I bought myself a new gimbal. What's a gimbal, you might ask? Well, it looks like that. Ow! And apparently it's delivered to you by drug dealers and briefcases. Camera geeks are going to love this. Oh boy, oh my God, look at this. Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. So now why should anyone care about that gimbal? Well, it's because you can get smooth shots like this. You see how this just happens and it's not, ooh. Whoa, whoa. Here, let's do like real fancy montage, Mel. Last and potentially funnest is the Feedback Sports Omnium portable trainer. This isn't a present from any family. I didn't buy this. This is from Feedback Sports, and they sent it out to me because I contacted them after South Africa when I saw Emma Pallant was doing a ton of her rides when it was fairly unsafe to go outside. The pros were actually told, don't ride on the course. You could get jumped. So she was riding on her balcony in this. This is a portable bike trainer. Look at this. Here, I'll show you how small this thing is. Whoa. I hope you guys realize that it's a lot harder to unbox things when I've got to stay in the frame of a camera. Do this for you. Something that is that small that I can just pick up very easily, that measures, fold it up, 25.5 inches long, 7 3/4 inches tall, and 6 1/4 inches wide. You can pack this up, put it in a carry-on or a bike box, and you got yourself safe, easy training for when you go to a race, or even if you're just a very frequent traveler and you want to make sure you've got a place to ride on your bike. Apparently you can put out like big watts on this. Big time power. All right, Trainiacs, I have successfully made a mess of the pain cave. All right, bigger, better things, cool, fun stuff. Lots of travel coming up in 2019. We are on our way to head to Lanzarote to shoot How to Swim with Lucy Charles and Reese Barkley. Big reason why we got a lot of this. Make sure you're subscribed for it, and later, Trainiacs. Oh, and I forgot. I think the best part. Look at that. That's what NTK and the whole fam all teamed together and got me. I like it. All right, now we're official. Later, Trainiacs. Morning, Trainiacs. Main tank is open again, but they're having a press conference over there right now. So we aren't allowed in there. This month is all about the triathlon master classes, and I have yet to announce this, but we're announcing it now. We kind of talked about it on the podcast that we did at New Year's. Sarah True and her husband Ben True, both Olympians, both awesome runners, are taking over the How to Run in Triathlon Masterclass. I'm going to show you both their running today. We'll also show you the pool. still hurts. Seriously bruised it over the holidays on a fat bike ride. Still hurts, like 3.5 weeks later. So that was a fun little swim with Hannah, a local Winnipegger who is actually going to school in McGill. Shout out to the McGill Tri Club. She's a good swimmer. 3 years into the sport, I could not drop her. All right, pools. So this pool here is called the training tank. 50 meters, and they switched the bulkhead about February to being a long course pool. In between about October and February, they put the bulkhead halfway, and it is 2 25-meter pools, but it's cold. It's made for the speed swimmers, for the training that they do to, boom, get really fast, so they keep it quite cool, not so great for us non-speed swimmers. But over here has been closed the entire time, so this is where you've seen me. Not anymore. It just opened. Over here, main tank. It is long course, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's also kept a fair bit warmer. Tuesday, Thursday, short course yards. And they've done a lot of work. You see that? Oh, it looks so nice. What they've done is, if you've been around for a long time, you know that a lot of my footage here was very green, kind of yellow, a little bit of orange. That's because all the lighting here was so dark that the camera was showing a lot of noise, so it would pixelate and it would turn green. Not anymore. Also, all of this, all along the sides here, is soundproofing. So instead of it being all echoey in here, it's quiet. I like it. I'm a fan, big fan of this side of the pool, huge. All right, let's talk about Sarah and Ben True. So Sarah and Ben True, potentially some of the most fast husband and wife athletes out there on the circuit. I'm trying to think. Lucy and Reese, they're pretty good. The Wortels, they're pretty good. I don't know, Ben True might have the trump card. He, at one point, might even still be the 5K American record holder. Let me give you some times. Sarah True, you know Sarah, she's been on the YouTube channel many a time, been on the podcast once. Two-time Olympian, 4th at the Ironman World Championships, 2nd at her Ironman debut at Ironman Frankfurt, is dropping it like it's hot all over the long distance triathlon scene. Husband Ben, top American at the 2011 and 2013 World Cross Country Championships, 5,000 meter personal best of 13 minutes and 2 seconds. 10,000 meter personal best of 27 minutes, 41 seconds, and winner of the 2018 New York City Half Marathon. They good. They are very good athletes. And when I reached out to Sarah, I said, hey, I like you. You're fun. And would you like to let me stick a camera in your face a little bit more, and you and Ben can tag team teaching a how to run triathlon masterclass? And she responded with, heck yes. As fun as it is to come up with a project like this and get it out there into the world, she's like, it's probably more important to pass on the knowledge that they've gained, because over the course of multiple Olympic trials, multiple Olympic runs, now getting into the Ironman distance, and then between the two of them, as Sarah put it, this is a really good point, as we were talking back and forth about what we were going to teach in the masterclass. And I quote from Sarah True, "Cool beans. One thing I think that would be really helpful is having a discussion about approaching running as a triathlete versus a runner." Sarah versus Ben. "A lot of us come into the sport as single sport athletes, and it's really important to talk about load, how fitness between sports is transferable, the different physiological demands, etc. What's helpful about our approach is that we keep things really simple and try to nail the basics, something that's important at any level." Well said, Sarah. So just like we did with the Lucy Charles and Reese Barkley How to Swim series, if you go to triathlonterran.com/early masterclass, I'll set up a spot there that you can go and for half price, $45 versus the $90 that it's going to be when it comes out, get in on this half off deal. And then when you get in on that half off deal, there is only going to be 50 spots. those people will be able to ask Sarah and Ben questions. So getting in, you get it for cheaper, and you can actually get your running questions answered by a couple of the best out there. Let me show you their running techniques. It's pretty impressive. All right, so this is some footage here of when we went and watched Sarah run and do a 12 times 400 meter track workout down in Scottsdale. I want you to take a look at a few things. Number one, look at how fast her turnover is when she starts doing her fast efforts. Tick, 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 tick. That's a slow effort right there. And then the second thing that I want you to look at is this is a perfect angle of it. Look at how much she is driving those elbows back. What we want to see in a really big stride, when you start opening it up or when you start getting tired towards the end of a long workout, you want to use your elbows to almost load up the tension across the front of your body. So watch how far back she drives both of her elbows. Forward, not a ton, but back immensely. You see this here at a slightly lower pace, but what happens is we'll show you right there at the furthest point back, carrying that elbow as far back as you can creates a bunch of tension across the front of the body in a good way that ends up essentially loading up your trailing leg so that when you start springing forward, it's like a slingshot. It starts snapping itself. So a lot of people end up, they run like this and focus on the forward. In her case, she's doing it perfectly, running with focusing on the elbows back. She might tell me that I'm wrong in a couple weeks when I go there. All the mid and forefoot runners will love seeing this. Her running at a nice slow pace, warming up, landing on her mid and forefoot. I just like this shot right here. Then you can see here really, really well how on top of her toes she is and how big of a drive she's got with those elbows that create that snap with the leg that ends up coming forward. She was doing an average of, can you guess what she was doing for 400 meters? I'll pause right now just for a second and you comment below, how fast do you think she was going for 400 meters? I'll skip forward. Right there. She averaged over the course of 12 400 meter intervals, 75 seconds. That equates to a, why can't I do math right now? A 5-minute mile. Not crazy fast, but when you think that at this point she was training for an Ironman, her first Ironman, when you think, oh, you know, maybe you should be backing off a little bit. She's still banging out 12 400s. You try to do 12 400s at 75 seconds. It's fast. Let me show you Ben True. Now, you want to talk about real pure runners, like actual track athletes and how fast they can go. Look at this. Ben is number 2, the guy in the black and red shirt. And this is perfect. Like, this is just a sight to behold. Man. So we want to look at something here. And sure, we don't have the flexibility in our hips and our quads to get a stride that is that far in behind us with all this stretch all the way down. A lot of us are going to have tight hip flexors at the front from sitting all day at a desk. We're not going to be able to have that big stride, but a couple of things that we can take are, again, look at this. Look at how far back his elbow is pushing to end up creating that tension. Look at how his body has a forward lean and how he lands basically directly underneath his center of gravity with ears over top of shoulders, over top of hips, more or less over top of knees, over top of ankles, and over top of your landing point so that your skeletal structure, as opposed to your muscles and soft tissues, are absorbing the load of landing. Good stuff, Ben. Good stuff. And then look at him here from the front. This is him winning the New York City half marathon. You can see that big elbow drive in behind on both sides. You can see how he's landing on his forefoot, just getting right up on the toes. You can see how he doesn't really cross over the center line, even though he's basically maxed totally out. And watch how he finishes at the end of a 1:02 half marathon. Like fire or lightning. He's fast. So what are the things that we're going to be talking about? Give you a brief overview of what we are going to do in the How to Run Masterclass with Sarah and Ben. As I mentioned, how the differences are when you approach running as a triathlete versus running as a runner. The key things required to run fast. Is it training? Is it the amount of fast stuff versus long stuff? Or is it the technique? What is that? How to run specifically for triathlon. Sarah, when we were talking to her once, she says it's a strength run as opposed to a speed run in ITU. What does that mean? How do you build strength as a runner? Their running setups. What do they use for shoes for different runs? What do they use for shoes in races? What's the gear that they use for watches and heart rate monitors or pacing, things like that? And how do they set those things up to supplement their training? Training with zones. Do they use pace? Do they use splits? Do they use heart rate? Do they use power? They may be using a stride running power meter. Nutrition during runs. And creating a year-long running program, and then their favorite running workouts. All this is what we're going to be talking about. So go to triathlonterran.com/early masterclass. And if you want to learn to run from some of the best out there, Sarah and Ben True, you can get in on it for half price, $45, and a whole lot of positive vibes from me, and get some of your questions answered. Just 50 spots. All right, Trainiacs, there we go. We are getting geared up over here. All packed up to end up going out for basically all of January to produce all of these master classes. And it's gonna be fun. I think what we're gonna do is a pro cribs, if they'll let me into their hotel room to show that off. All right, later, Trainiacs. What's up, Trainiacs? With 2018 coming to an end, we're doing this series talking about reflecting upon, looking forward to 2018, 2019, and today we are going to go over my, I don't like calling them New Year's resolutions, but things that I want to achieve in 2018. Morning, Trainiacs. Just cooking up my little post-workout shake. That was 3,200 meter swim in an hour and 4 minutes. Now that I am officially into the strength and speed building phase of the year, kick the workouts up a notch from like the 25 to 2,700 meter swims to a little over 3,000. And then in January, when we start getting into race season, because my race season starts early, we kick it up to around 4,000. Aquasizers are loud in the morning. All morning, every morning. One of the things that's come up over the course of the Trainiac virtual camps lately is how important Zone 2 training is. And people have said, well, how do I deal with Zone 2 when on the run my heart rate spikes higher? How do I deal with Zone 2 in the pool? Today, I'll explain like how to implement Zone 2 with the swim, the bike, the run, and what you can expect, because you're gonna have a bit of a rude awakening when you start doing Zone 2 training. By the way, Zone 2 training, probably the most important training you'll do. So, let's talk about Zone 2 training. I'll link to a couple videos that I've done in the past couple weeks about just how important Zone 2 training is. But to touch on it for like half a second, I'll explain how and what Zone 2 training is, how you can get it. All right, so this calculator here that I've created is a customized Terran's eyes created only, like my version of how to figure out your zones. It takes a little bit of some of the zones in running, a little bit of the zones in biking, a little bit of the zones in power and perceived exertion. And it takes it all in, makes it very, very practical to use as opposed to a lot of those training zones that you get that are just templates online that say, oh, here's a percentage of your max heart rate, or here's a percentage of your heart rate based on your age, which really aren't very accurate. But this takes into account your individual FTP test, your max heart rate test, your level of medication or injury, or how hardy you've been in training, things like that. So it gets you a really narrow and specific set of zones, and we use a 5-zone heart rate system that is the same for the bike, the run, and the swim. And I'll explain more about that. You can get this by going to triathlonterran.com/HR training, but I've expanded it from heart rate to also include power. So go check it out. Okay, so speaking about Zone 2 training, it is where you do the bulk of your training. I guarantee that just about all of you are going to be spending more time in Zone 3. You don't want to do that. Zone 2 is just hard enough to create a cardiovascular response where your heart and lungs get stronger. You also burn a fair bit of fat because it's at a low intensity, but it's not so intense that you're digging yourself a hole, opening yourself up for illness and injury. Most people do most of their training in Zone 3 because it's really comfortable. It feels hard enough that it's like, oh, hey, I'm doing a whole bunch of work here, but it's not so hard that it's making you fast. So it's digging you into a hole, but it's not making you any faster. It's also not improving your cardiovascular system. So it's this gray zone is what it's called. Zone 2 is where you want to spend, like I say, about 40 to 50% of your time, somewhere around 20 to 30% of your time in Zone 1, and a total of 20% of your time in Zones 4 and 5, because those are really intense and they are fast enough to actually make you faster and stronger. So like I said, you can get this and all of this customization at triathlonterran.com/HR training. But when it comes down to actually doing the work, that's where I started getting a lot of questions over the course of this training camp. I'll explain. So as the trainiacs from the virtual camp started doing some of the prescribed zone training, a bunch of questions came up. First off, how in the world do you run in Zone 2? Most of the athletes weren't able to keep their heart rate low enough to actually stay in Zone 2, and that's really, really natural. What we've done with that calculator is we've set the cap of Zone 2 a little bit lower so that it actually is harder to keep your heart rate that low. And the reason for that is because running is so corrosive on the body that we want to be extra cautious and make sure that we aren't getting ourselves into that gray zone training, which is really hard on our muscles, our cardiovascular system, our neuromuscular system. So we back off a little bit with those customized zones. On the bike, it actually should become fairly easy to stay in Zone 2. However, it's not going to feel very difficult. The first few times that you bike and run in Zone 2, it's going to end up being fairly hard, especially on the run, to keep your heart rate under there. On the bike, if you start spending that 40 to 50% of your time in Zone 2 really working on strengthening your heart and lungs, you are going to find that all of a sudden it starts becoming easier to access that low heart rate. And that's the whole benefit of this, is that right now, if you start running and all of a sudden, boom, your heart rate goes up to 150 beats a minute and you're really not even running that hard, that means that you have a ton of potential to improve because you aren't even able to access your low heart rate. You know, have you ever watched any of those Lionel Sanders training videos where he's like, oh my God, my heart rate was like 150 there? That's that low at his absolute crazy maximal efforts because his cardiovascular system is so well trained that he doesn't blow himself up and get into the red line very often, and he's accessing more of those lower heart rates. So it's important to stay in zone 2. However, for 4 to 5 weeks, it's going to take a quite long adjustment period that's not going to feel very intense. Here's how you can make it intense whether you're on the bike or the run. Number 1, if you're on the run, you can end up playing cadence games. So it'll probably force you to slow your pace right down, but you can slow that pace down while trying to keep your cadence fairly high. Keep pushing that cadence up is probably going to shoot your heart rate up a little bit. That's okay. You can also then start nasal breathing. Nasal breathing, instead of mouth breathing, has really big cardiovascular benefits. I'll talk about that another time, but it is also going to make it hard. So maybe you do 3 minutes nasal breathing, 3 minutes mouth breathing with a low cadence, 3 minutes mouth breathing with a high cadence, and keep cycling those through. Whether you're on the bike or the run, it's going to break it up instead of just saying, all right, well, I'm gonna go do 80% of this 60-minute run for 48 minutes. I'm just gonna be in low zone 2 training. Super, super boring. But with this, it breaks it up and it keeps you mentally engaged because there's more things that you're working on and they are really beneficial things. What about on the swim? People say, well, should I stay in that 80-20 where 80% is at really low intensities in zone 1 and 2 and 20% is in the high intensity? Well, 2 things. 1, because of the hydrostatic pressure, the water crushing essentially the outside of our body, it's hard for our heart rate to get high as it is. You can go and max out in some water running and your heart rate might only get to about, say, 140, 150 beats a minute. That is going to have a lower amount of stress on our body. Second thing is just in general, because there isn't so much pounding and there isn't so much corrosiveness on our body in the swim, we can up the intensity and not really worry about getting into those gray zones or those really difficult zones that are hard on our body. If you think about how often young elite swimmers are out there training, they're probably training 14, 15 times a week, and they're training really intensely, but it's not like it's overtraining them. Rarely do you see an overtrained swimmer. So don't necessarily worry about that 80-20 too terribly much on the swim. So stick to the 80-20, doing a good chunk of your training in zones 1 and 2 for the run and the bike. Also, play those games to break it up so it's mentally engaging. Don't worry too much about that 80-20 on the swim. And then, what can you expect? Be patient. Somewhere around, I would say 4 to 5 weeks. If you are being patient, you are sticking to 80% of your efforts being at lower heart rates, you're gonna find very quickly, and this is the time to do it in the season, that your pace is going to increase at the same heart rates. At the same perceived exertions, your heart rates are going to be lower, which is then going to result in when you hit that 20%, it's gonna be bam, really fast because you've been fresh, not training in that gray zone that's just digging a hole for yourself. So that's going to then result in when you're trying to be fast, you are going to be much faster than if you had done a whole bunch of gray zone training, and that is going to allow you to get really fast. This is why you can see person after person after person racing year after year after year, doing all the training and not getting any faster, not really making any improvements, and even getting injured because they're doing a ton of their training in zone 3, not enough in zone 2, and when they want to go hard, they don't go very hard. So Trainiacs, if you want to get that spreadsheet, like I said, go to triathlonterran.com/HR training. Also, this is something that we talked about for probably 3 to 4 hours over the course of the virtual camp. So it's a really big topic. Let me know your questions about zone 2 and just zone training in general, how we balance that 80-20, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, all of those things. Let me know about them in the comments below, and I'll probably have to do more videos. Later, Trainiacs. Morning, Trainiacs. Right now, we are in the middle of a few weeks of Trainiac virtual triathlon camps. Yesterday, we did a heart rate test, and I talked a lot about how people need to be way down, spending lots of time in zones 1 and 2. And zones 1 and 2 are not what you'd expect them to be, but they are critically important, especially at this point in the year. So I figured, why not talk about how to incorporate a lot of zone 2 training to make your fast efforts feel easier, to avoid injury, to really actually make yourself faster while working not quite so hard, and how this ended up working for 6-time world champion Mark Allen. We have a very zone 2 little 1-hour recovery ride today, so I'm gonna finish that up and we are going to talk about all that after I get back. Ooh, just 118 beats a minute. Cruise. All right, so back in the day, 6-time Ironman world champion Mark Allen, potentially one of the greatest triathletes of all time, he would train in such a way that over the course of the off season and the early beginnings of a year, he would be training so slow that all of the other athletes from around California that used to train with him, oh my God, why is Mark training so slow? And we're talking like he was running 9-minute miles, and that might not be slow to you, but for Mark Allen, that was incredibly slow. But what would happen is he would slowly get faster and faster and faster, and what he was doing was he was training at low intensity zone 1 and 2 heart rates over the course of the off season and the base building period of getting ready for an upcoming season. And what would happen is he would train that low heart rate level so well that over the course of the year, as he did more and more of it, his speed would improve at the same heart rate. So all of a sudden, by the time the race season would come around, he would be cranking out 6, 5.5 minute miles thereabouts, and his heart rate would still be nice and low. And that is the power of zone 2 training. We can all apply this. It doesn't have to be Mark Allen. We all have the power to go faster while it takes much less out of us, while we're able to perceive that it isn't that difficult, while everyone else around us is we can stay nice and calm. Related to all this, a lot of people say, do you do Maffetone method training? That's what Mark Allen used to use. How does that fall in line with all of your zone heart rate training that you talk about? It's a combination of everything, and I'll show you how I incorporate them to work practically for most people. So in here is a calculator that I've created that incorporates both typical zone heart rate training and Maffetone method training. They're quite often talked about separately, but really they are related. So what we have is a combination of the zones, and some of the zones are dictated by Maffetone method training. So Maffetone method training is the result of these first 4 rows here, where you enter your age, and we'll do this for me, I'm 36. You answer yes or no. Have you had an illness lasting more than 3 weeks in the past year, or do you take regular medication? My answer is no. In the last year, have you had more than 2 colds lasting 3 days, or have you had an injury that's caused you to alter your training? Yes, I have. In both cases, those are indications that you might be overtrained a little bit, and I was. Have you been training consistently and not experienced any of the above issues for the past 2 years? No, because I answered yes to the second one. And what this does is, instead of just taking that fictional 220 minus your age and saying that's your max heart rate, what this does is it takes that and then it starts customizing it based off of these inputs that you give it, going a little bit up, a little bit down. And whether you are a little bit healthier or a little more overtrained, maybe a little bit sick, it starts customizing your zones beyond that. So then what we do is we take a max heart rate test, We input that. Last week, I did one that resulted in 176. And then you don't necessarily have to put in your FTP number, but we will leave that out for now. And what we've got here is the calculation of your ceiling for Maffetone method workouts. Again, this was often thought of as separately from heart rate. But what I've done is I have set a 5-zone heart rate system, and this is what I like to use. And instead of using the typical, say, 75% of your max heart rate for the top of zone 2, I have actually set the Maffetone heart rate as the top of zone 2. So it's a little bit more of a customized zone 2 where it's incorporating actual data that you've input and typical guidelines for where these bands of zones are. Now, here are the guidelines for how you use all of these zones. Zone 1 and 2, you want to spend up to 80% of your training time in these 2 zones. And the reason for that is because this is a really, really powerful training zone. You want to spend about 20 to 30% of your time in zone 1. This is your warm-up, this is your cool down, this is your complete recovery workout. You want to spend about 50 to 60% of your time in zone 2. This is the really strong cardiovascular building endurance workout. This is your long ride, your long run. And you set that top of zone 2, which is the Maffetone method heart rate number, as your cap, because at this number, you are stressing your cardiovascular system a lot, but not stressing your nervous system very much. It's allowing you to still stay fresh and go for hours and hours and hours on end, building immense amounts of endurance, burning a lot of fat, and creating a more efficient cardiovascular system. We want to stay out of the gray zone. Zone 3, maybe you only spend about 10% of your total annual training time in this zone, and it's in the last several weeks before a race because you're sharpening up where most people race in zone 3. But why we don't spend a lot of time in this is because it's not easy enough to have those same beneficial effects that we get in zone 2, so we don't really get those good cardiovascular benefits, but it's not hard enough to end up making us faster or stronger. So it just ends up in this kind of comfortably hard sort of pace, and I will blow your mind here. You are probably spending a huge amount of time in zone 3 because it feels good. It's not so hard that we have to back off from it, but it's not so easy that it's not like, oh, well, it doesn't feel like I'm doing any work here. It actually feels really comfortable, so you have to be conscious to stay out of this zone because, like I say, you're not going to be getting faster and you're not going to be improving your endurance. Zone 4, you want to spend somewhere in between about 10 and 15% of your total training time in zone 4. This makes you aerobically much more fit, increases your top end, your VO2 max work. Zone 5 is your anaerobic, your neuromuscular power, making you faster and stronger, which you spend about 5 to 10% in. And think about it, here's the power of a lot of zone 2 training. If you come to the race season and all of a sudden everyone else hasn't developed their cardiovascular system and they're pumping away at 160 beats a minute, close to red line, whether they're doing a sprint or an Ironman, odds are that they're gonna break before somebody who at 140 beats a minute is at the same pace because you have so much more room. You're a long way away from your top end. Damn thing is, it's really hard to do because, like I said, it is so terribly boring and it doesn't feel like you're doing a lot. You have to be very patient. But I'll give you an example. Somebody that I know very well started out doing running in nothing but zone 2 training just 6 weeks ago. I had to do a 7-minute kilometer and I was like, do I even upload this to Strava? This is embarrassing. Now, I'm doing a 5:20 kilometer just about 6 weeks later at the same heart rate. And that's showing how much stronger I can get. That's the nice thing about zone 2 training is improvements come really quickly and they are tremendously powerful for a long period of time. How can you actually apply this and make it less mind-numbing? I got ideas. I got I got some goods here. So number one, if you capture heart rate data from a watch, from a chest strap, from, I don't know, something like this or a phone, look at your workouts afterwards and see if you were going as easy as you thought or if you're going as hard as you thought. Also, if you're using something like Training Peaks that collaborates and brings together a whole bunch of workouts, go back and see if you are roughly around 80-20 as a whole. And then I've got 2 ways that you can actually start doing these zone 2 workouts and making it less mind-numbing, feeling like you are doing quite a lot. Number one is to break up the workouts. And that can be, say, a long run. Let's say you're doing a 1-hour run. You can do that 1-hour run in 80-20 itself. So you can go really easy for 48 minutes, really hard for 12 minutes. Or you can do 10 minutes really easy, 2 minutes really hard. You can break it up mentally so that it's easier to get through instead of just slogging through a long run, not feeling like you're doing much. Second thing, and this is quite new and very important to do, is you start breathing through your nose only. And I'm gonna talk a lot more about this in the future. I'm just kind of wrapping my mind around all the science and gathering the data about it. But if you start breathing through your nose only, it trains your body to hold more carbon dioxide in the lungs. And when you have more carbon dioxide in your body, your hemoglobin and red blood cells can actually use the oxygen in the red blood cells better. When we are breathing really heavy, we are pushing a lot of the carbon dioxide out of our body. And because there's such a little amount of carbon dioxide in our body, even though we might have a really high blood oxygen level, our hemoglobin and our red blood cells can't actually assimilate all that oxygen into our muscles. But just breathing through our nose, it keeps more carbon dioxide in, allowing us to actually access more oxygen. Damn thing is, it feels like you're gonna die. So, even though your heart rate's nice and low, it is gonna feel very challenging. So again, this breaks up an otherwise monotonous workout. Let's say you are looking for that 10-minute at low intensity interval in a run. Maybe you can only get through 4. So you've broken it up into 4 minutes of nasal breathing, 6 minutes of mouth breathing, 2 minutes hard. It's a lot more enjoyable than just 60 minutes easy, right? I got smarts. So Trainiacs, 2 things. A lot of all of this division of 80-20, it's all done for you on Team Trainiac. So if you are going to sign up for Team Trainiac, right on, more power to you. You're gonna be well ahead of a lot of athletes. Number 2, if you aren't going to sign up for Team Trainiac, but you like the sounds of this and you want this calculator that is a little bit different than what you'd find online, and it incorporates just more practicality than a lot of those because it's customized to you, go to triathlonterran.com/HR training and you can get that spreadsheet and customize it for yourself. I did some good zone 2 training this morning. My lungs feel fit as a fiddle. Not when I go outside into the winter. All right, later Trainiacs.
Triathlon can be quite a grueling and uncomfortable sport at times, so we often look for ways in which we can prepare ourselves. And sometimes they can be a little bit weird. So I've spoken to a few of the pros about their triathlon hacks, and lucky me, I get to try them out. So you're probably wondering, why on earth I'm holding a jam sandwich? Well, I've got Andy Potts, aka the Muffin Man, to thank for this. So Andy Potts told me that he used to eat a jam sandwich as he head out for a run to try and train his stomach to get used to taking food on during an Ironman. So here I am with my jam sandwich. Let's give this a go. So everything tells me, don't eat just before a run, and here I am. Thanks, Andy. So one thing I didn't check with Andy is, did this work? So we're about to find out. Let's go. Oh gosh, sorry. I'm fairly pleased this is just an easy run. I'm not sure I could run any harder. I mean, can literally feel the jam sandwich here. Well, that was interesting to say the least. And Andy, I've got to say, I'm not so sure on your choice of a jam sandwich, but I guess if you're going to pick a food that's going to test your stomach, well, a jam sandwich is right up there. Personally, I'm used to eating a couple of hours before most of my runs, so that was pretty uncomfortable, but I guess it was testing my stomach. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Next up, we're going to give this hack from Emma Pallant a go.
Okay, any weird pro hacks you can share with us?
I would say quite a convenient one is when we're traveling around the world and you know, you get to a hotel and you're excited because it has a pool and then it's like 7 meters long. So now we travel with one of those like surfboard straps.
Okay, like a leash.
Yes,
yeah, okay.
a leash. So attach it to something like either on the side of the pool or outside of the pool, or a friend you don't mind falling in holding it, and then yeah, strap it to your ankle and you've got an endless pool.
That's an awesome idea.
I've honestly
The problem is with things like endurance sports is what you deem failure to yourself is completely different as to what others deem failure. So I'm going to go to Barcelona and I want to do 9:59. If I go there and do 10:01, it's a personal best Ironman and everyone's going to go, oh, that's amazing, mate, you did an Ironman in 10 hours, 1 minute, that's great. But I'm going to be massively disappointed. "9:59 at Barcelona means nothing to anyone other than me. That's it. The end. Doing something like an Ironman ratifies the whole reason why you train. Do you know what I mean? If you just go out and train, then I'm kind of a targets-driven person. I want to know how fast I went. I want to know if I'm improving this year. And unless you race, you never know. You just go out and ride your bike for 5 hours. Well, was that better than last time I rode my bike for 5 hours? I don't know. So I'm goal driven in order to see how I'm progressing. And there's no better way of seeing how you're progressing than racing against other people. Yeah, I've done one a couple of years ago down in Weymouth in the UK. I was aiming for around 11 hours. You've never ever done 11 hours worth of exercise. You've got no idea how that's going to feel. That's the difficulty in it, really. And you know it's going to hurt, and you know it's going to be mind over matter for a lot of it. So yeah, from going to just under 11 hours at Weymouth to I'm aiming to go just under 10 hours at Barcelona, it's quite a big step up, really. I'm not sure if it's achievable. We'll see on race day. The swim will be the same. I'm hoping to lose about 40 to 45 minutes off my bike time at Barcelona, do the same transitions, and then I need to run about 10 minutes quicker. When you get to your adult life and you get a proper job and it all kind of slips away, and I just ended up in the rat race of modern society where you put on some weight and you're working in a job where you sit down all day. And I don't remember the process of going from skinny, fit teenager to being like mid-20s, overweight, looking in the mirror going, what happened to me? So if you want to turn it around, you've got to do something about it. And I'm not the sort of person that can just go, oh, well, I'll go out running every day and I'll just get fit. I have to sign up for something where I've got an event that I'm aiming for and train towards that event. And that's what triathlons did for me, really. You know, you put something in the calendar, there's a marker in the calendar, there's something to train for. You are going to be there at 5 AM, racking your bike, putting a wetsuit on, and if you haven't put the effort in, it's going to be horrible. So put the effort in.
What's your prediction in terms of how realistic you think it is going under 10 hours?
I'm 50-50, as if that would ever happen. I should be going to Barcelona and going, I want to finish in the top 5% or I want to finish in the top 2%. Whereas running a race for a particular time is completely the wrong way to go about it. Well, it might be a really hot day, it might be really windy, it might be really choppy. You actually want to finish in a particular percentage in the field. but 10 hours seems to be a bit like a 3-hour marathon. If, you know, there's runners out there, 3-hour marathon's always kind of the golden, you know, the golden time that people aspire to. And I think like a sub 10-hour Ironman is the, you know, that's kind of like the pinnacle of the amateur triathlete. Tomorrow I'm going to do basically a full-on dress rehearsal for Barcelona. I'm calling it a metric Ironman, so it's just going to be 2.4 kilometre swim instead of a 2.4 mile swim. Same again for the bike, same again for the run. So total will be 140.2 kilometres instead of miles. And it's literally 62% of an Ironman. Hoping to do it about 6 hours to 6 hours 10. You can't do an Ironman in training for an Ironman because you just kill yourself for the next month. Basically, you're not gonna improve that way. So this is probably as close to like race conditions as I can possibly get without completely killing myself.
Yep, that's hard. It's never going to be easy, but it is hard.
You start, I'm getting to that point in my life where I might not have many years left of improving my fitness. I may as well try as hard as I can now while I've got the body that'll enable me to do it as hard as I can now.
Got to do another 38% more distance than today. Wow. Bit of resting, should be alright. Oh, I'm hoping that's salt seawater and not sweat, otherwise I need to drink more. Ay, ay, ay.
Really bad stomach pains. I went to see the doctor in the morning and he had a bit of a prod around and said, "We'll get you booked in with a surgeon, just have a chat in a couple of hours time." So I straight down to the hospital and the surgeon saw me straight away and had a prod around and said, "Yeah, we've got a slide theatre in like 3 hours, we'll whip your appendix out."
So originally I was told it'd be about a 45-minute procedure, just keyhole surgery, and then I'd probably be able to go home the next day. But yeah, I had some complications.
I woke up about 4.5 hours later and had a stomach drain in, and they'd had to turn the operation into a normal operation rather than a keyhole one, and my appendix had already ruptured by the time they got in there. So
this is my current triathlon training. I'd say the corridor is probably 150 meters, and if I can walk from one end to the other, then that's great.
At the time you think about all the negatives, you know what I mean? You're lying in a hospital bed thinking, oh, well, that's it. In 6 weeks' time, I'll start lightly training again. In, you know, 3 months' time, I'll be back onto, you know, a proper training program, and by then I won't have very long to go to Barcelona. So mentally, it's devastating.
So here we are, home again. Officially an outpatient. We can get rid of this. Lose the hospital tags. Oh. And here's my dishevelled post-surgery body.
That's it, I'm never going to be able to do the Ironman. I'm never going to be able to go sub 10 hours, and that's it. And you just think about all the negatives and that you're never going to... You're literally never going to do it in your life. That's it, it's all over. And then you come out of hospital and step by step, you build your strength back.
So I've just been out on my time trial bike for the first time since my operation. I just went out and did about an hour on the bike at a sort of very sensible heart rate. And actually, I have to be honest, my legs felt okay. The bit where I've had my operation, my actual scar, the seam of my triathlon suit just runs straight over the top of the scar, and that was the limiting thing. I was going to do an hour and a half, but I had to come home after an hour because it's just hurting.
You have to accept that you set yourself a training program and you've got to take it in your stride. not kind of pretending to be anything I'm not. You know, I'm not a pro triathlete. I'm an average guy. I've got a full-time job. I've got a family. And in hindsight now, it's easy to look back and think about it, but it was actually good for me because you can overtrain, and the tedium of just training day in, day out, week in, week out, it can actually set you back. Whereas I had a complete month and a half off and I did nothing. And when you start, you've got more drive, you've got more motivation, you're more rested, your body's had a proper, you know, a proper recovery. And actually it was probably good for me. I never would have been able to force myself to have that kind of break without an injury or a, you know, an illness or a hospital trip. So it probably did me a favour in the long run. We're here, there's the finish line. That's it. Sunday. Practice the finishing pose.
And what's your prediction crossing that finish line come Sunday?
One of two ways. It's 50-50. It's literally black and white. It's 10 hours and 1 second or it's 9:59:59. There's no like, you know, if I do 11 hours or 12 hours, I'll feel exactly the same as I would doing 10 hours 1 second. You know, I've obviously been in hospital, had my appendix out and thought I was going to have to cancel it and so on and so forth. And you just go through this whole long journey and it seems like the last 5 months of my life have all been building up to today. You know, I've got a job and I've got a family and stuff, so there is other stuff going on in the background. But in my mind all the time, it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing Ironman Barcelona in 5 months' time, in 4 months' time, in 3 months' time, and there's a training plan going on and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
So it's a big deal.
So yeah, it becomes a big deal, albeit in your own mind, really. No one else cares if I do 10:01 or 9:59.
Hurting now. Just hurts.
Scale of 1 to 10 to playing?
10. Just need to keep eating.
I've got low battery on my watch about half an hour ago, so I'm running blind soon. I'll leave you for the final 10k.
See you at the finish. Thank you for that. Yeah. I don't know what time I did. My watch battery's dead and I didn't see the screen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lexia. Mwah. 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 Oh. What time did I do?
Just seeing that sign that says like finish line 200 meters away, I wanted to cry. It's like, that's it, I've done it, I'm there. I'm gonna turn onto the carpet now. And the only thing was that I didn't know what time I was on. I tried to I was looking for Katut and Lexi. I couldn't see them in the crowd. I saw one of my friends from the triathlon club. I high-fived him and then ran around to the left and the right high-fiving people. I finally saw Katut and Lexi at the end and gave them a high five. And I didn't look at the screen above my head either as I went over the finish line, so I didn't actually know what time I'd done.
What time did I do?
You want to know?
Yeah.
9:36.
With about 7k to go, I just went off feel and just started pushing and pushing. I had one last gel, one last end of it thing. I dropped the bottle and just, that was it, just go for it. And that was awesome. I got to the finish shoot and there was no one else in it, so I could take my time and just enjoy it. Yeah, it's amazing.
I think she was probably more relieved than I was that I did sub 10 hours, because now she knows I don't have to sign up for another one and try and do it again. And they were brilliant. Obviously, you know, our daughter's like 20 months old. Yeah, they were down there at first thing on the bike course, and I saw them on the turnaround on the bike course, and then they were there for every lap of the run course. And after I finished, it started tipping it down with rain, and they were just waiting outside the change tent in the rain for me to go and get my recovery food and get changed and everything. Yeah, just give them a big hug and say thank you. None of those 3,400 competitors or whatever there were yesterday have got to that start line without putting themselves through a significant amount of training, you know, sacrificing things, etc., etc. And everyone's got their own story. You know, there's cancer survivors there that have been in absolute no shape to do a 5K that have gone, I'm going to do an Ironman in 2 years' time, and they've, you know, trained and they're doing it for charity and they're doing it for a good cause and all that sort of stuff. And they get to the finish line just before the cut-off in 15 hours, and they're an emotional wreck because, you know, that was their goal. You've got guys with lesser goals like me that just want to do a particular time, but it means something to me.